Okay. The end of winter preparations. I wanted to finish all of the stinky work in one go before the Blue Priest returned. It said that he would make the hide glue and candles to get today, along with some cheese on the side. At my place, we only ever made cottage cheese by adding vinegar to milk we bought from someone who raised cows. But Lutz's family got lots of eggs through trading eggs, and thus made fermented natural cheese. That's what the orphanage is going to want, right? It lasts longer, said Lutz. I don't know what that cheese stuff is, replied Gil, but the more food, the better. I watched Lutz and Gil chat as they worked. It had taken me a while to get to the workshop, since I had Hearthspiel practice until third bell. But it seemed the work had been going fine without me. The workshop was filled with some priests and some apprentices doing work at Fran's instruction. As I rarely got the chance to see the workshop where it was operational, due to normally helping the high priest of paperwork around now, it was fun for me to look around. Let's Gil, how's it coming along? Pretty good for now. The pig hides are over there. The candles are getting made over there. We're in the middle of cleaning off the meat scraps from the filtered wax. We haven't done that, salt thing yet. The pot beside Gil and Lutz already had the peeled inner layer of the hide in the lime water. They must have just put them there recently, as they were far from swollen. There were 3 gray priests filtering melted cow fat in the direction where Lutz pointed. The hides will need to be here for a bit longer. Salting out the wax is kind of tedious, but it's better than having stinky candles, and the oil's better, so I hope you keep up with it. Apparently Lutz's family didn't know about salting out either. My family started doing it since it actually did make the candles smell less bad, but it wasn't really a thing around here. It was probably due to the fact that I lived in the poor part of the city, and although salt was cheaper than spices, it still wasn't cheap itself. If you chop up mimosa and dimple herbs into really small bits and mix them with the melted wax, it'll get rid of most of the smell. But don't use Girekt or red rum herbs no matter what. That'll just make them more stinky. Be careful. After I explained how to make the candles smell less like wild animals, Lutz blinked in surprise, then cackled with his shoulders shaking. Yeah, I remember when you messed those candles up. Failure is the mother of invention, okay? Success is born from the midst of countless failures. Huh, that makes sense. You're pretty smart, sister mine. Gil nodded over and over at my platitudes, his eyes shining with sincere admiration. My attendants really sure are cuties. I hope he'll always be this sweet. By the way, sister mine, what's that salt stuff about anyway? Is it hard? It's annoying to do since it makes things take longer, but it's not hard. You add it to salt water and boil it over low heat for a bit, repeatedly removing the scum that arises. When it cools down, you'll be left with the hardened oil on top and the salt water on bottom. Once it's completely white and solid, you drain the water beneath it and use the pure oil that remains. I explained the process as briefly as I could, getting forward fervent nods in reply. Lutz was also nodding while listening, but then he blinked after having a sudden realization. Hey, Mine, don't we need to use some of this fat for soap? We get that from divine gifts, so we'll be fine using all of this for candles. At our homes, we left out a share of the oil to make soap in the spring, but in the temple, we were given soap as divine gifts. It was important for gray priests to keep their hoods and clothes and bodies clean, so we were actually given quite a lot of it. Those in the orphanage would much prefer food to soap, but blue priests had different priorities. Oh, and Gil, I imagine that the cloth they used to filter that fat will have plenty of tiny meat chunks stuck to it. Please tell the gray priest that tonight's soup will taste a lot better if they put those into it. Gil nodded hard and ran over to the filtering priest. They opened up the cloth and peered inside, leading to a cry of excitement loud enough for me to hear. Yeah, meat's pretty good, said Lutz with a laugh. I smiled at him, then turned to look around the workshop. Hide glue and candles weren't the only things being made. There were gray priests and apprentices getting oil from fruits using the pressure tools meant for squeezing water out of fresh paper on the draining bed. We naturally want a lot of oil since it could be used for both lamps and cooking. The orphanage usually only made soup for food, though, so none of the oil would actually be used in the kitchen. Paper, the usual focus of the workshop, was shoved into the corner. I could see paper in the process of having its water drained, plus white and black bark left out to dry. My eyes fell on the stacks of completed paper. Hey, Lutz, how much paper has the workshop finished right now? Lutz followed where I was looking and narrowed his eyes. Since we just printed all those picture books, I'm guessing 300 pages at best? Probably less. Not sure exactly how many, since there's still a lot of it drying. What, you need some? I wanted to print a second wave of the children's Bibles, but I want to make them all at once since the templates go bad. I want to make as many as possible in one go, so how much paper could you make if you started now? We needed a lot of paper and ink to make sure the templates weren't wasted. I could order linseed oil from Benno to make more ink, and we still had plenty of soot lying around. The problem was paper. Vollrum wood's not too good for firewood, and it's about time for the bark to start hardening up, so there should be a good amount at the lumberyard. I'll go check later. We should be able to make 750 sheets if we used all the white and black bark we have here. Good lord. Okay, try and make as much as you can, okay? Leave it to me. Lutz was willing to make the paper, and that was fine with me. Mind, want to go check out the cheese while the hides are swelling up? Asked Lutz. I nodded, and we moved to the girls' building, while Fran continued to handle things at the workshop. You're making cheese in the girls' building? Yeah, with the pots. You don't want us mixing the pots for making paper with the pots for making cheese, right? Personally, I don't want the pots we boiled ash and bark in to be used for preparing food, but there was a surprisingly large number of people around here who didn't feel the same way as long as the pots were washed. Most were fine with a little bit of ash getting potentially mixed into their food. I could stomach that, but I would rather not. Plus, the orphanage kids were used to eating food left over by nobles, so if we had enough pots to keep things separate, we might as well. It's finished. Begin drying these then. When we arrived at the girls' building, the children were drying the fruit and the mushrooms they had gotten in the forest, while shrine maidens and apprentice shrine maidens made cheese and soup, plus jam by boiling some of the aforementioned fruits with honey. The sweet scent in the air was entirely unlike the beastly animal scent in the boys' building. It's funny to think that even though we're making this much soup, it'll all be gone by lunch. I wish the harvest festival would be over already. Making soup over and over all day is such a pain. The chefs were extra busy since we were getting fewer divine gifts from the blue priests now, a situation which demanded almost twice as much soup as normal. I couldn't help but smile as I saw the girls chopping vegetables with pursed lips and stirring pots with exaggerated frowns. Sister mine! Upon noticing me, the kids hurriedly stopped working to cross their arms in front of their chests and kneel. I told them to continue on like normal, and they all resumed work, looking much more tense than before. They're super scared of me. The priests in the workshop were mostly used to my presence, given that I often popped in to discuss things with Lutz or watch over their work. But I basically never came to see the soup being made, so it was clear that it was left based on the pot and the fire, so he murmured this should be alright before heading to the kids drying fruit. Hey, shorties, we gotta go get some stuff from the store. Finish up here and come to the workshop when you're ready. There's lots of stuff being delivered there, so we gotta start getting it now before it all piles up. The children gave hearty smile replies and stopped drying the fruit to clean up their baskets instead. You should go back to your room, mine. Everyone will just be nervous with you around. Of course. Thanks for doing all this. I returned to my chambers, pleased at how well everything was going. At this rate, we would easily finish before the blue priest returned, and once the smelly work was done, we were free to take our time. Work was going on in the kitchen of my chambers as well. Alongside my normal meals, the chefs were extremely busy salting the slices of pork that were too thin to be smoked, and cooking them confit style to preserve them. I climbed the stairs while watching the busy kitchen out of the corner of my eye, and once in my room I saw Delia reading a children's Bible to practice her letters while Rosina faced the work left to her by Fran. Shall we continue making the template? I thought about starting my own work, but Fran held out a wooden board with a smile. Perhaps later, sister mine. I believe it would be best to study your prayers so that you will be ready whenever the Knight's Order might call for aid. Naturally, the Knight's Order was comprised of nobles. No failure, however minor, would be permitted if they called upon the temple for aid. It was easy to see why Fran would be more worried about being summoned by the Knight's Order than preparing the orphanage for winter. When would they be summoning me? There is no set date, but every year they request aid once or twice before winter begins, so the summons should be arriving soon. I see. Under normal circumstances, an apprentice would never participate in a ritual. They were too important to be carried out by inexperienced apprentices, which was why I hadn't participated in any baptism ceremonies, adulthood ceremonies, or the Starbind ceremony. Furthermore, the Knight's Order had many men and tended not to enlist the help of blue shrine maidens for fear of illicit rumors. A summons from the Order was meant to enlist blue priests for a ritual, and yet since there weren't any blue priests in the temple to perform the ritual, I had to step up the task, despite normally being the last person who would be picked for the job. But Fran, I don't get it. Doesn't the High Priest have a lot of mana? I wasn't the only one with a lot of mana. As far as I knew, the High Priest had more mana than the rest of the Blue Priests combined, and then some. There are times and situations where he will need to prioritize his duty as a noble over his temple duties. It seems that the Knight's Order was experiencing a noble shortage just like the temple, and just like the temple, many of the talented knights had been summoned to the sovereignty, resulting in a situation where nobles with mana far below par were being allowed to join the order. In the midst of all that, the high priest was an excellent noble that had graduated from the Royal Academy, and thus it was possible that he would be so busy supporting the order that I would need to do my job as Shrine Maiden. All this information came from Fran, who conveyed it all furtively. Wait, my first real job as a Shrine Maiden is going to be a joint mission with a platoon of knights? Isn't it a bit too much to ask? I chanted the prayers with a cold sweat running down my back until Fran suddenly realized something and looked up. Sister mine, how are your ceremonial robes coming along? They finished the temporary stitching and begun the primary stitching, so it shouldn't be too long. I had been told that it would take 4 days if Karina remained in good health, and 10 at the absolute worst. I passed it on to Fran, who sighed in relief. In that case, please bring them to the temple as soon as possible so that you may leave the moment the summons arrives. I returned to practicing my prayers with Fran, and eventually Gil came over carrying a box. It was apparently a delivery from the Gilberta Company. Can I get some help, Fran? Called out Gil from the first floor. There's some big boxes over there. Certainly, I'll be there at once. Delia, Rosina, please begin opening the boxes. Sister mine, please stay where you are and continue practicing. Fran stood up to answer Gil's call and went downstairs with Rosina and Delia. The two girls opened the boxes placed in the hall, while Gil and Fran went to get the rest from the workshop. Yes, the rugs are finally here. I can hear Delia's happy cry echo up the stairs, reminding me once again how much she liked decorating and redecorating my room. Now we can prepare the chambers for winter. If you'll excuse me, I need to start redecorating. Delia, it is almost time to eat. Let us wait to redecorate until after we've eaten. Rosina stopped Delia's rampage before it could begin by postponing the redecoration until after lunch. Now then, sister mine, please go with Gil to the workshop or someplace else. After lunch, Delia drove me out of my room with a smile. Since the high priest was absent, I couldn't enter the bookroom even with Fran. That left the workshop as the only place I could go, and since Delia said that she needed Fran's help, Gil was the one accompanying me there. Let's ask me before lunch to go check on the hides and see if they're swollen yet. Let's go check them out, sister mine. The orphanage was still in the middle of eating. Judging by how the workshop was completely empty, there was nobody to stop me, so I just went ahead and peered into the pots. Looks like they're good now. Once we wash them to get the lime off, start the boiling. Huh? Mine? What are you doing here? Let's, having finished lunch at Benno's, and thereby having finished giving Benno his report, blinked in surprise after seeing me in the workshop. It was rare for me to visit the workshop multiple times in one day, since I wasn't allowed to participate in the work myself. The Gilberta Company sent over rugs today, remember? Delia's head over heels excited to redecorate, so she kinda kicked me out. Huh? Well, that's convenient. Master Benno told me to tell you that your robes are done and to visit Karina when you can. Why not go now if you can't be in your room? I'll drop by to get you on my way home. Suggested Les, and I nodded. It would be dangerous for me to just stand around outside on a cold autumn day. Benno's store would be a safe refuge for me. I like that idea. I'll take Rosina with me to Karina, so could you bring Fran with you? When you come get me, I won't make Rosina go back on her own. All right, you go wash the hides, added Gil. I'll take Sister Mine to her chambers. I returned to my chambers with Gil, only for Delia to yell a hearty "Jeez" at me since they had already started moving furniture. It seemed that messy chambers were a disgrace, and for that reason masters must not return until the redecorating is finished. I just heard they finished my ceremonial robes. I'll be going to the Gilberta Company now, and then I'll go straight home. You'll at least have to let me get changed first. Also, Rosina, could you accompany me to Karina's? Of course, Sister Mine. Rosina left to get changed into her outside clothes, and Delia changed me while excitedly informing me that the redecorating will be finished by tomorrow. Sorry, Fran, but Lutz will be dropping by later to take you to the store. I just couldn't bear to send Rosina back alone at so late in the day. Understood. Until tomorrow, Sister Mine, I humbly await your return. After Fran saw us off, I walked down the chilly city streets with Rosina, who was wearing her freshly purchased rogue outfit. Fran often walked me home or to the Gilberta Company, and Gil often went to the forest, but Rosina rarely had the opportunity to walk outside. The way she was peering around curiously, despite having to scrunch up her nose at the smell, was very cute. You know, I began, I think Wilma's art would improve if she walked outside like this.
I'm leaving.
Okay. She might develop the courage to do just that sooner or later. It wasn't too long ago that she trembled in fear from afar whenever a gray priest drew water for our soup, and now she's giving them instructions. It seemed that Wilma was conquering her fears bit by bit now that she had been entrusted with the orphanage and its children. I was glad to hear reports of Wilma's growth through Rosina. Hi, Mark. I'm here because Benno called for me. The master is presently in a business meeting. If you would wait here for a moment, I will go contact Karina directly. I sat in the chair offered to me by Mark, and Rosina slid into position beside me. An apprentice brought me tea at Mark's instruction. I drank it and took a deep breath. Lady Mine, please follow me. Mark addressed me as Lady Mine since I had Rosina with me, and I was visiting Karina as a customer. We left the store and climbed the outside stairs to the third floor. Karina, Lady Mine has arrived. Hello there, sweetie. Karina greeted me with a dreamy smile after Mark opened the door for her. Her eyes then widened in surprise after falling on Rosina. Oh, you've brought an attendant with you. Should I call you Lady Mine then? It doesn't matter to me, but it does to Rosina, so maybe you should. In that case, Lady Mine, please follow me. She guided me to the usual parlor, and then I found my ceremonial robes hanging on a clothing rack spread out wide in front of me. Wow! She had positioned the rack such that the light streaming from the window hit the robes, which brought out the seasonal flowers and the wavy embroidery, which had been sewn with the same color thread as the cloth. The light actually made the embroidery with its little sparkles of white thread look like water so much that I found myself at a loss for words. It's splendid. Rosina's breathless praise brought me back to my senses. Karina, this really is beautiful. I thank you ever so much. Why, I must thank you myself. Karina held down her slowly growing belly with one hand while gently removing the robes from the rack. Please try them on. Forgive me, miss, but could you please help? It's a bit hard for me to move with a belly this large. But of course. Rosina took the blue robes from Karina and put them on me. She was fast and efficient, which made sense given that she served another blue shrine maiden before me. The robes had been dyed completely blue with embroidery of the same color. The sleeves and hem were lined with silver, and there was fancy gold embroidery beneath the neck. On top of that, the crest of the mine workshop was embroidered with gold, and the center of the outfit when viewed from the front. I stood in place, frozen by anxiety. I felt like a bride wearing her wedding dress or something. I had to act graceful and elegant. I couldn't let them get dirty at all. I felt like the clothes were wearing me and demanding that I live to suit them. Here's the sash. It seemed that sashes for ceremonial clothes differed based on age. Apprentices had white sashes with silver embroidery, while adults had white sashes with gold embroidery. Karina explained that the embroidery contained words of prayer from the Bible. Excuse me, but this cloth seems to be exceptionally heavy. Rosina looked up at Karina as she wrapped the sash around me, and Karina gave an explanation with her bright smile, not faltering for an instant. If you sew multiple layers of cloth into the robe ahead of time, they can grow along with Lady Mine. I fashioned them in this way after learning the technique she described to me. It was a risk, but surely one that will be beneficial for ceremonial robes that she will rarely use. You surprise me as always, Sister Mine. Rosina let out an awed murmur after Karina explained that she had made the robes at my instructions rather than devising them on her own. Rosina then stood up having finished dressing me, and gave a firm nod after looking me over from every angle. This robe truly is splendid. Every time you move, it reveals more of the flowers and water, and they will surely draw the attention of all those around you. Rosina had served Sister Christine, and still gave these robes her utmost approval. Karina, having been tense about using a technique on such important robes, visibly relaxed. I had my ceremonial robes, and my chambers were being redecorated for winter. We had preserved our food, made candles, and stored them both in cellars with firewood. The hide glue was placed in an area where cool wind blew, and the workshop was hard at work making paper and ink for our second round of printing. And finally, we knew what tools we needed for winter handiwork, and they were all being bought. The orphanage's winter preparations were more or less complete. Ooh, here we go! Here we go! Someone's from the Knight's Order! The time for the Harvest Festival ended, and the Blue Priests returned to the temple. I hadn't seen them arrive myself, but I could indirectly tell by the increased amount of divine gifts to the orphanage. The High Priest had been sent to a relatively close town, and thus returned quickly compared to the other Blue Priests, which meant I was back to helping him again every day after third bell. High Priest, I finished the math on these sheets. Just like usual, I was blasting through the math the High Priest assigned to me. I looked up after finishing a stack of sheets just in time to see a white bird flying straight through the window. Oh no, it's going to hit the window! I cried on instinct, only for the white bird to pass right through the glass and do a loop inside the room. It flapped down to the High Priest's desk and folded its wings politely. What's going on? I was panicking with wide eyes, but everyone else seemed to know what the bird was all about. It's magic. The High Priest's attendants were eyeing it with only a little caution. Be quiet, Mine. The High Priest chastised me as he touched the bird, and the moment he did, a male voice began to speak from the bird's mouth. Ferdinand, the Knight's Order calls for the temple to perform its duty. Prepare to set out at once. The message was repeated thrice, then the bird disappeared in the thin air and dropped a yellow stone onto the table. The High Priest took out a shining wand-looking thing from somewhere and lightly hit the stone while murmuring something. The stone immediately began growing in size with its shape twisting until moments later it looked like the same white bird as before. Understood, spoke the High Priest at the bird with a wave of his wand, and in turn the bird spread its wings wide. It then flew out the window through the glass just like it had when entering the room. Wow, so fantasy! I woke with excitement at the magic the High Priest had just performed, only for him to glare at me. That made me realize that the previously still attendants had stopped working and began cleaning up, preparing for something. Mine, the Knight's Order calls upon us. Get changed into your ceremonial robes and head to the Nobles' Gate at once. The high priest looked so serious that I replied with an enthusiastic, "Yes, sir!" Even though I had no idea where the Noble's Gate was. Where's the Noble's Gate? "I will guide you," said Fran, as he did the crossed-armed salute to the high priest. Then he picked me up before immediately leaving the high priest's room. He strode quickly down the hall. "Sister mine, have you memorized the ritual prayer?" asked Fran, and I nodded while clinging to his shoulder. "Delia, Rosina, prepare the ceremonial robes at once." The moment Fran opened my door, he let out a loud shout unlike anything I had heard from him before. He didn't stop moving as he yelled either. He strode right up the stairs at high speed. Upon arriving on the second floor, he set me down, turned around, and sped back down the stairs. Delia ran up to me with the robes and set them on the table before immediately starting to take off the blue robes I was wearing. "Huh? Jeez, please stay still." Delia's blue eyes glared at me hard after I reeled from the abnormal intensity of her undressing. While I froze in place, stunned by how much of a rush everyone was in, Delia slid the ceremonial robes onto me. Rosina began tying the sash while I was getting my arms through the sleeves. Delia went and got a yellowish strap of cloth, which Rosina tied around my sash as further decoration. Have they rehearsed this? Wow! Just as Rosina finished tying the sash, Delia pulled out my hair stick in one swift, smooth motion. Rosina sat me onto a nearby chair before my hair even had time to finish falling down. "Sister mine, you will be dealing with the Knight's Order. No matter what happens, you must not allow any displeasure to show on your face." As Rosina stood behind me and brushed my hair, Delia took the fancy hair stick I wore at my baptism out of the closet. "Sister mine, please wear this one." I took the hair stick and bundled up my hair like usual. "Sister mine is ready," called Delia, and Fran immediately rushed up the stairs. He was wearing a pouch on his waist, and he set the tools he had been using in the high priest's room for work onto the table. "Rosina, please put these away. Forgive me, Sister mine, but we must hurry," said Fran, and he picked me up once again and strode out of my chambers. "Fran, where is the Noble's Gate?" "It is located at the back of the noble area of the temple. It connects to the Noble's Quarter and is used for blue priests returning home or entering the Noble's Quarter on church business." Considering I had been taking long detours around the noble area of the temple to avoid seeing blue priests, and that I had no business in the Noble's Quarter, the Noble's Gate had basically been irrelevant to me up until now. "Sorry to keep you waiting." "Well, you had to get changed and everything, so I would have taken some time." We passed through a door within the noble area and found the high priest clad in silver armor, along with Arno holding the staff that was the goddess of water Flutrane's divine instrument. The high priest's entire body was covered in plate armor, and on top of that he held a full helmet beneath his left arm. The helmet wasn't very decorated, but it was styled like a Corinthian helmet from ancient Greece, where there was a T shape in the front which covered the nose but left the eyes and mouth visible. To top things off, his gleaming silver armor had a blue cape covered in vibrant designs. In front of them was a tall wall that seemed to separate the temple from the outside, with a large two-doored gate that seemed impossible for human strength alone to open. Each were made of the same white marble as the temple, and under the sunlight they were so bright it was hard to look at them. "Are those your ceremonial robes?" The high priest looked at me over from head to toe after Fran set me down, then spun his finger in a circle to instruct me to turn around. I held up my arms and spun so he could see more of it. That is a somewhat unusual design, but it is better than I expected. The high priest's expression softened, then he called for Arno, who came this way and held out something toward me. "Mine," continued the high priest. "You were born in summer, as I recall. I will lend this to you for now. You will do well to put it on your middle finger." Arno had given me a ring with a large blue gem in the middle. The ring was clearly too big for me, but I took it and said my thanks before putting it on my left middle finger as instructed, expecting it to slide right off. But once it was on, the gem shone with a bright blue light, and the ring shrunk to fit my finger perfectly. "What?" "Quick, cease gawking over every little thing. Can you really blame me? How could I not be surprised? These weren't little things to me." "I don't blame her on that one. I'd be gawking at every frickin' thing if I was there." The high priest lending me this ring meant that it would be important when we were going, and we were going to a land of fantasy where nothing I knew would apply. "Wait here," instructed the high priest, who then walked to the gate with his armor clanking. Upon reaching it, he placed a hand upon a door. A massive magic circle immediately sprang into the air, just like the one that appeared over the hidden door in his room. The gate then began to open on its own, slowly but surely. And despite being used to automatic doors from my Arano days, the sight of that made my heart jump with surprise. "Your commoner origins are painfully obvious. Could you at least try to remain silent?" The high priest was expecting too much from me, an actual commoner. But Arno and Fran seemed unfazed by the opening gate, likely due to having accompanied the high priest to the noble's quarter before as his attendants. If this was normal for nobles, and something that both they and their attendants experienced on the regular, then the Knight's Order would doubtlessly view me with suspicion, if I were to keep letting out embarrassing cries of surprise. I pressed my lips together to try and contain them. "Follow me." The high priest began walking through the open gate. Arno followed, and so did Fran after picking me up. We passed through the gate and into the noble's quarter, and my eyes widened in shock. It was like passing through the gate that led us to another world. There was a large fountain in the middle of a paved stone plaza. The plaza gleamed white as it reflected the sun's rays, and the street was made of the same stone. In the lower city, tall buildings were crammed next to each other, but here, ivory stone paving and lush green parks stretched on as far as the eye could see. And unlike the filthy lower city, I couldn't see a single trace of grime here. The noble's quarter was startlingly clean and beautiful. Even the air was cleaner, perhaps due to something keeping it separate from the lower city. Probably. There were 20-some knights in the ivory plaza, each wearing silver armor similar to the high priest, but distinguished by yellow capes instead of blue. They were undoubtedly the Knights' Order, and they must have noticed the gate opening as they gathered together and formed 4 rows. "Sister mine, please act like a noble," whispered Fran, in a quiet voice with me still held in his arms. I nodded and attempted to make a graceful smile like Rosina's. Only the lone knight who stood in front of the others had a helm under his arm. He was a somewhat stocky older man with reddish-brown hair. Each movement he made was trained and precise, almost beautifully so, but he had the furiously intense air of a warrior. He walked up to the high priest and knelt before him, which signaled all the knights behind him to kneel as well, filling the air with the sound of clanking armor. "Lord Ferdinand, I am pleased to see you well." "Same to you, Karlstadt." It's Karlstadt! Yay! I like that guy. He's cool. Him, Ferdinand, and someone else is cool too. But that's for volumes. That's for the next volume and the one after that. And probably after that. The man talking to the high priest seemed to be named Karlstadt, and it was hard to guess that he was the captain or something in the Knights' Order. "Not many knights with you today?" "There are many who have not returned from the harvest festival." "I see," murmured the high priest in a resigned tone before lifting his hand. Fran set me down and gently pushed me from behind so that I would stand in front. "Karlstadt, this is mine, the Apprentice Shrine Maiden who will be performing the ritual. Keep an eye on her, if you would." "Greetings, Lord Karlstadt. I am mine. It is a pleasure to meet you." I knelt before Karlstadt and greeted him, calling him Lord as was appropriate to do for a noble of higher status. Our eyes met as I knelt, and his light blue eyes narrowed as if he were evaluating me. "A pleasure to meet you as well." "Let us be off, then." At the high priest's word, all the knights stood up and touched the gems embedded on their right gauntlets. The gems shone brightly, and in a moment the plaza was filled with sculpted animals. Judging by the fact that the gems were gone from each gauntlet, these multicolored animals had probably been created from them, just like the bird had been created from the stone. "Karlstadt, allow our attendants to ride with one of your knights. Mine come with me." The high priest, now wearing his helmet, gave instructions while picking me up and setting me onto what appeared to be a white lion with wings. I straddled his back, trying to maintain my balance. The high priest jumped onto the animal's back behind me with surprising spryness for someone wearing a full set of plate armor, then gripped the reins. The lion sculpture immediately proved not to be a sculpture and started moving like a normal animal. He just told you not to do that. I jerked from the unexpected movement, hitting the back of my head against the high priest's chest plate. Ow! "You would do well to keep your mouth shut, unless you want to bite your tongue off, that is." I clenched my teeth hard and leaned a bit forward, then gripped the shaking reins in front of me. The winged lion ran a few steps forward, then jumped high into the air with its wings spread wide. For a second, I felt something hit me like I had jumped through a giant spiderweb. But the feeling only lasted a moment. We raced through the sky, flying right over the lower city. "Wow, we're so high." "Were you not afraid?" "I was just surprised at something unnatural I didn't expect happening. This is actually less scary than carriages since it isn't shaky." The magical lion soaring through the sky felt kind of like a slow roller coaster. It was much more comfortable since it didn't shake hard like a carriage. The lack of a safety belt was thrilling, to say the least. But I wasn't that scared since I was nestled between the high priest's arms as they gripped the reins. "Yeah, I think you would be fine." Other flying animal sculptures rose into the air alongside us. Horses seemed to be the most common one, and so a rainbow of different colored flying horses soared through the sky. There were some wolves and tigers in the midst, too. Personally, I thought the flying rabbit was the cutest one. Flying rabbit? Who's the flying rabbit? "High priest, what are these animals?" "They are high beasts made from magic stones. They will move freely as long as their supply of mana does not run dry. It is up to the caster to decide what animal to turn their stone into." Whoever picked the flying rabbit has my respect, unless it's Shikiko's, in which case, screw you. We passed the lower city, flying over the gate and following the city road from above. I could just barely see the distant walls of another city in the direction the road was going. Our city was surrounded by lush forests and sprawling farms. I had just finished participating in the harvest festival. "High priest, where are we going?" "Over there." The high priest pointed toward the far end of the forest where we usually went gathering. There was a large crater opening a hole in the forest. I did a double take and realized that it was a wide expanse of exposed dirt with no grass or trees, yet somehow there was a massive plant monster rampaging in the middle. A tromba! Swinging giant branches around it, and the more it rampaged, the larger the crater grew. What is that thing? A fey plant known as a tromba. What? That's a tromba? The rampaging tromba in the middle of the crater was so unlike the stretchy tree things I knew that I hadn't recognized it at all. Well, that's because the ones you know are the ones that are just growing and don't have a chance to even get any big. Speaking of which, I remembered how Lutz and the other kids had all freaked out after seeing a tromba, and how half the guards at the gate had to work together to take one down once it got too big. I had heard that the Knight's Order would get involved when the tromba got too big for soldiers to deal with, but I hadn't expected it would end up this monstrous. They're dangerous. Only now did I understand why Lutz got so mad when I suggested way back when that we cultivate trombas ourselves. You will be needed after the Knights finish it off. Until then, hide in the forest and do not put yourself in danger. It seemed that it was the duty of priests to restore mana to ground drained of its own mana by trombas. Due to their diminished numbers, the High Priest was helping the Knight's Order kill the tromba and would help me restore mana to the ground afterward. Is it just me, or is the High Priest kind of amazing? He is. He is very much so, at least from what we see in the anime. I'm imagining even more so in the light novels. The High Priest pulled the reins and descended to an opening a short distance away from the tromba's crater. The rest of the Knight's Order followed him down. Wait here with Fran and Arno. Karlstadt, assign 2 of your men to guard her for me. He slid off the back of his line and turned around to speak to Karlstadt, who nodded and selected 2 guards. Damuel, they said Shikikoza. Whatever. Shiksa, whatever. Guard her. Yes, sir. The knights named Daniel and Shikikoza climbed off their flying horses to serve as my guards. The horses flashed with light that beamed into the holes of their gauntlets, turning back into gemstones in the process. Thank you for the assistance. Fran and Arnold thanked the knights who had flown them here before nimbly jumping off the animals. I tried learning from their example and jumping off, but the High Priest glared at me before I could, stopping me with one angry look. Oh, right, I need to be graceful. I remembered that I was supposed to be acting like a noble and turned sideways on top of the lion, which had stopped moving entirely like a statue. You will be the end of me, muttered the High Priest as he picked me up and set me down to the ground. He then looked up and spoke in a louder voice. Guard the Apprentice Shrine Maiden closely. Allow no harm whatsoever to come to her, not even a single scratch. Yeah, they can't even manage that. The 2 knights ordered to guard me nodded with a firm yes, sir. The tromba's crater continued to grow in size bit by bit as everyone got off their high beasts. Out of nowhere, I heard the massed fluttering of a flock of birds and the sound of something heavy hitting the ground so hard the earth shook. Gah! Through the cracks in the trees, I could see that a massive one had fallen. Roots that seemed almost alive sprouted from the tromba's crater and wrapped around the fallen tree. Its leaves dried and crumbled before our eyes as the large trunk dried as its life was sucked out. And once it was completely sapped, the roots returned to the ground, having nothing more to do. I felt a cold sweat of terror run down my back. I had never imagined that trombas were so monstrous. With fear in my heart for the Knight's Order about to fight the rampaging tromba just ahead of us, I knelt to the ground. High Priest, men of the Knight's Order, I pray for your success in battle. May you all have the divine protection of Angriff, god of war and subordinate to Leidenschaft. The moment I said that, the ring in the High Priest had given me glowed blue, and light fell upon the members of the Knight's Order. I realized that the stone in the ring was sucking up my mana and hurriedly held it back. The ring stopped glowing once I had my mana completely cut off from it. We have the blessing of an Apprentice Shrine Maiden, men. Let's go, roared Karlstadt, which made me realize what I had done. I looked up at the High Priest and saw that he was looking down at me with a conflicted expression. Mine, under no circumstances whatsoever, should you make any move until it's time for you to perform the ritual, he said, emphasizing the word under no circumstances, part extra hard before straddling his lion and strolling upward. The other knights followed suit, grabbing their reins and flying into the air. Oh, come on, I want to continue! I'm continuing, I'm sorry. Tromba extermination. That sure was a pointless blessing. What are you, stupid? One of the knights mocked me with a smug snort once the rest of the order was well into the air. Shikikoza, why would you say that? I'm still saying Shikikoza, because that's what it was said in the anime. I don't care if it's actually right, or whatever. You all can tell me that later. But yeah, screw him. Screw Shikikoza. You deserve your punishment. I couldn't tell them apart since they both had their helmets on, revealing only part of their eyes and mouths, but it seemed that the smug one was Shikikoza, and the one trying to get him to stop was Damuel. Judging by their voices, they were both fairly young. They had probably just come of age, if they had at all. I'm assuming they're at least of age, so that means at least 15, I think? If not a little older. Am I wrong, though? We're on a big mana shortage, and there she goes wasting some. Blessing knights fighting a tromba of all things. Either she's stupid or nobody is. Shikikoza knocked aside Damuel's hands and pointed at me. It's true that the Order would never lose to a trauma, blessing or not, but Angrif's blessing will still be a big help, especially since we're so low on numbers now. I listened to their argument with a cold sweat running down my back. I only said what I did because I wanted to pray for their safety when fighting against that giant trauma. I didn't realize that trying to talk like a noble with reference to the gods would make something an actual blessing. When my ring started glowing out of nowhere, I was more surprised than anybody. The prayer never would have happened if the High Priest hadn't lent me this ring. It was a complete and total accident. I'm sure the High Priest was surprised too. Not to mention he was calling it a waste of mana, but I stopped the flow of mana that second I noticed it. Only a tiny fraction of my mana ended up sucked into the ring. I doubted it would cause any problems with the upcoming ritual. No, it doesn't. I apologize if I offended you in any way. I will take greater care in the future. I kept my protest on the inside and just apologized immediately to prevent things from escalating into something I really wouldn't want to deal with. Chikikoza gave me another dismissive snort, but if that ended the conversation, I was totally fine with it. You don't need to worry about what Chikikoza said Daniel in a consoling tone. A blessing that boosts mana will be greatly appreciated right now, since we're so low on numbers. And here, take a look. It's about to start, he pointed to the sky. I followed the direction of his finger, and through the branches I could see glimpses of the knights flying in circles in the sky. I stretched my back a bit and squinted, hoping to see how in the world they planned to beat that monstrous Tromba. I heard a faint shout in the distance, and wasn't sure who had shouted or what, but at its signal all the knights took glowing black weapons into their hands, each radiating what looked like pure darkness. Where are those? Do you know, Fran? No, this is the first time I'm seeing a battle so close. It seemed that the attendants rarely accompanied priests answering the summons of the Knights' Order, since it necessitated one priest fighting alongside the knights to provide magical support while the other stood at the ready with the divine instrument. But since the high priest was fighting with the Order, and I couldn't stand waiting with the divine instrument twice my size, Fran and Arnold had come along to keep an eye on me. Shrine Maiden, those are weapons with the divine protection of the God of Darkness bestowed upon them. If you infuse them with your mana and attack, you could take twice the amount of mana from anything you hit and make it yours. They're vital for exterminating Trombas. Wait, you could take twice the amount of mana from what you hit and make it yours. So how would you run out of mana? Hello? Having not expected a noble to go out of his way to explain things for me, I looked up at the armor-clad Daniel in surprise. I could see only slivers of his face through the helm, but it didn't seem like he was looking down on me for being a commoner. Not many people get the chance to see knights fighting like this. I wouldn't waste this opportunity if I were you. Thank you ever so much. We start by wearing it down with arrows. Look, the one with the blue cape is Lord Ferdinand. Daniel pointed at a knight riding a lion and pulling back the string of a sizable bow. He resembled a nomad shooting a bow on horseback. The cape flowing in the wind behind him was the only blue cape in the midst of all the yellow capes. That's the high priest? Wow, go get him! I couldn't actually shout my support, so I cheered him on silently. He was too far away for me to see the actual string itself, but I could tell when he shot from the movements of his arm and the arrow flying through the bow. The arrow shot through the sky and burst into multiple smaller black arrows which fell upon the giant Chomba like grain. Each arrow burst into an explosion of light upon hitting the plant, but the giant Chomba just kept swinging its branches as if not even a storm of arrows meant anything to it. It takes a lot of mana to split an arrow into that many smaller arrows, and yet Lord Ferdinand can shoot out tons of arrows like that. Pretty impressive, huh? Daniel seemed to really admire the high priest, judging by the fact he was proudly telling me how amazing he was. I wish he would come back to the Order soon, murmured Daniel in the midst of his praise, which made me blink in surprise. Daniel noticed me looking at him, and after an awkward silence, coughed. That's confidential. I understood. I won't tell anyone. I had heard that the high priest wasn't raised in the temple, and it seemed that he had been in the Knights' Order of all places. That explained how he knew Karlstadt and why they had matching sets of armor. I never would have imagined from his slender build and grumpy bookish appearance that he served as a knight, and not just as a desk jockey. But now that I was seeing him fight, he seemed to be right in his element. To think that he's a master of both the pen and the sword, is it just me or is the high priest kinda amazing? I wish he would lend me some of that talent. I love this. I thought while looking up at him fight. He launched arrow after arrow at the Tromba while his blue cape fluttered behind him. Looks like it's starting to take its toll. Can you see the Tromba turning black? As Daniel said, each spot the high priest's rain of arrows hit was now turning black. The tiny black dots looked like stains in which each arrow another one joined the mist. I could see them. Oh, the branches! And if these black spots were rotting the Tromba from the inside out, one of the branches that had been swinging around snapped at the base and fell to the ground with a thud. The fallen branch shone brightly and vanished. The giant Tromba stretched out one of its still healthy branches as far as it could to try and knock down the flying knights, but they were all too nimble to be hit. In contrast, the knights wielded their black halberds, each of which looked like a fusion of an axe, a spear, and a jagged pike, and chopped, sliced, and stabbed at the branches, which turned increasingly black until they fell to the ground. The branches fell one after another, and before I knew it, the Tromba's crater had stopped growing. With fewer swinging branches dominating the airspace, the knights were able to fly close to the Tromba's trunk and attack it directly. It was an enormous trunk, but it too became covered in black spots. I could easily tell that the Tromba was losing strength with each blow it took. Should be over soon, murmured Daniel, looking a bit more relaxed than earlier. At the start I had no idea how the knights would survive fighting such a dangerous giant, but they were finishing off much faster than I expected. I sighed in relief too. I didn't know how anyone could fight with a monster like that, so I'm glad to see nobody ended up getting hurt. This happens every year. We might be short on numbers, but we're not going to lose to a Tromba, especially with Lord Ferdinand helping. As far as I can tell, cutting down those branches was a lot easier thanks to him. It seemed that killing the Tromba would have taken a lot longer without the High Priest raining barrages of arrows down onto it. Without many ways to attack the Tromba from a distance, they would have had to get in close to weaken it, which ended up with multiple knights getting sent flying by branches every year. I couldn't see his face well due to the helmet, but Daniel had a kind and gentle voice. I looked up at him with a smile, then heard a hateful tongue click from behind. Daniel, why are you acting all buddy-buddy with a commoner? Oh, has nobody told you who she is? Allow me to inform you that the girl you're talking to is a commoner. She is a fool who doesn't know her place, wearing a noble's blue robes despite her dirty blood. Ass. I honestly have no idea what Lord Ferdinand was thinking when he gave a lowly commoner blue robes. Surely a shortage of mana is better than this. No, would you rather have a shortage of mana and no food and everything? I doubt it. Shikikoza, what are you saying? Don't lie like that. Daniel's shaken tone made it clear he hadn't known that I was a commoner. He must have so kindly explained the situation because he thought I was an apprentice shrine maiden of noble birth. I took a step back to distinct myself from both Shikikoza and Daniel. I had no idea what a noble would do after learning that I was a commoner. Things could get bad if he reacted like the High Bishop had. It's true, the High Bishop visited my family's home during the Starbind ceremony and bemoaned his suffering. A lone commoner girl is destroying order in the temple, he said. So it was you all along, High Bishop. I had driven him into the corner of my memory since I never saw him in the temple, and he hadn't done anything to me, but it seemed that he had been moaning about me endlessly to nobles around the city. Of course! He can't do anything to you because you would kick his ass. This is bad, and it might get a lot worse. Since I was a commoner, all my protests would fall on deaf ears. They could distort the truth to suit their needs and do whatever they wanted under false pretenses. Hateful gossiping like this would be a dangerous enemy to me while I was traveling with the Knight's Order, which consisted entirely of nobles. Oh yeah, they could say some stuff. Say something, commoner scum, so Shikikoza said, but I didn't know what he wanted from me. I had no idea what a noble would do to me if I said the wrong thing. But it seemed keeping my silence angered Shikikoza more, and his lips curved into a sadistic grin. What, nothing cocky to say without Lord Ferdinand here to protect you? Stop it, Shikikoza, we're supposed to be protecting her. Her status doesn't change the job we've been given, yelled Daniel standing in front of me protectively. But that just poured oil on the flames of Shikikoza's anger. Shut it, Daniel. Know your place. Don't try to order me around ever again. Daniel gritted his teeth and stepped to the side. Now that I could see in front of me, I saw Shikikoza walking this way. The sight of an armor-clad man clanking his way toward me with eyes full of hate was nothing short of terrifying. I'm scared. My legs shook and my teeth chattered. I wanted to run away, but I couldn't move my legs. Seeing how scared I was, Shikikoza cackled and rose a clenched armored fist. Sister mine, out of the way! Fran leaped between us to protect me, but Shikikoza pushed him so hard he was sent flying. Fran! I instinctively raced toward Fran, but Shikikoza grabbed my back of my hair and stopped me. I could feel several strands ripping out of the back of my head as he pulled me back. Ow! Sister mine! Fran! Yelled Arnold as Fran speedily got up and tried to rescue me. You must not move. Your master's being punished for you acting out of place. You must not make things even worse. Hearing that, Fran bit his lip and froze, which made Shikikoza grin even harder in amusement as he violently pulled on my hair. Listen up, commoner. At times like this, you're supposed to apologize for your attendant's rudeness. Fran was biting his lip to hold his anger back, and I had to learn from his example. I had been told countless times not to argue with nobles. My safest bet would be to just apologize. I apologize for my attendant offending you. But it seemed that my apology just ticked Shikikoza off more. He placed a boot on my chest and kicked, sending me flying to the ground. My butt hurt, and I could hardly breathe, but at least he wasn't holding my hair anymore. What's with those smug eyes? Want me to gouge them out? Really? Good God, I hate this guy. I can't wait to see him go down. Barked Shikikoza furiously before pressing a hand against the gemstone in his left hand and drawing a faintly glowing wand from it. He spun it around and murmured, Messer, which turned the thin wand into a small knife. Its pointed tip gleamed in the light. I swallowed hard at the sight of a knife being thrust in my direction. Cold sweat ran down my back, and I could feel my heart beating unnaturally fast. My legs were so shaky I couldn't even stand up. All I could do was stare at this gleaming blade. Shikikoza, don't. We're supposed to be protecting her. She's the apprentice shrine maiden we need for the ritual. Daniel panicked at the sight of the blade and reached out, but Shikikoza knocked both his warning and hand aside before lifting up the knife. Stop, shut it. She doesn't need eyes to perform the ritual. You do realize that Ferdinand's going to notice this. I don't care what you think, but he is the one in charge. He said with the knife in the air. I curled up like a turtle with my hand on my head to protect myself from it. That's right, commoners like you should just need to ball up and show us nobles respect. I shut my eyes tight and soon heard the sound of flapping wings behind Shikikoza as he shouted. I looked up at the sky. I saw a blue cape fluttering high in the sky beneath the upheld knife. High Priest! Knowing that he could protect me from Shikikoza, I immediately stood up to cry for help, but I stood up just as Shikikoza was hurriedly lowering his hand after hearing the words High Priest, and it sliced the back of my left hand since I was covering my hand with it. Ow! Why would you stand up, idiot? I lowered my hand and saw at a glance that the blade had cut fairly deep, aided by gravity. It would take a long time for the bleeding to stop, but I knew complaining to a noble would get me nowhere, so I just hurriedly pulled back my sleeve so my ceremonial robes wouldn't get dirty. I held my left arm straight forward and held its sleeve up with my right hand. Sister mine, allow me. Fran immediately knelt beside me and stuck his hand into his waist pouch. It seemed he had prepared something in case I got hurt. My attendants really were top of their class. Thank you, Fran. Blood gushed from my gaping wound down to my wrist before dripping to the ground, and the second my blood soaked into the ground, I began to rumble loudly. My blood continued to drip as I looked down, confused. With each drop, the ground rumbled louder, and in the blink of an eye, trauma sprouts burst out of the ground right beneath me. What? The trauma grew faster than any I had seen before, and its branches were wrapped around my feet before I knew what was happening. Ah, no! I desperately tried to kick them off my feet, but the branch after branch wrapped itself around me. By the time I pulled one branch off, several more replaced it, wrapping themselves so tightly around my ankles I couldn't take a single step. And the whole time my dripping blood was invigorating the trauma further, making it sprout in all directions as it raced up my body. This isn't my fault. You shouldn't have stood up like that. Denial, denial, denial. Ass. Shikikoza sliced away at the trauma in a panic with his knife as he stepped back to get away from me. Sister mine, Fran, lacking a blade, tried to pull the trauma off me with his bare hands, but the branches had grown large enough that it was nigh impossible to break them with hands alone. The trauma reached my knees, then stretched up my thighs. Its green sprouts stretched out and bloomed into white stems, while its stretching trunk brown like the color of a tree. The stems wrapping around me grew thicker bit by bit as they wrapped around me tightly enough to hurt, while new sprouts reached out to me. Apprentice! Daniel took out a glowing wand from his left gauntlet and turned it into a knife. Before, even as he did so, the trauma branches wrapped around me 20 times. Hold on, I have to grant myself the God of Darkness's divine protection. I'll save you as soon as I... Really? This can't happen without a freaking worded prayer? Daniel began chanting a prayer. It strongly resembled the same prayer I would be giving during the ritual, one that praised the gods and prayed for their divine protection. Or in other words, it was long enough that I had to work hard to memorize it all, and just thinking about how much the trauma would grow while he prayed sent a shudder down my spine. I'm scared. My teeth chattered. Thoughts of the tree falling into the giant trauma's crater and having the life sucked out of it flashed in my eyes. So scared. I'm so scared. Tears brimmed in my eyes in terror of being consumed by the trauma. I waved my arms around to knock off the branches, but that just sent blood flying everywhere. That made more sprouts pop up out of the ground. The stalks wrapped around my thighs stretched out to my hips and stomach. I couldn't even move, and I was so terrified that I screamed as loud as I could for help. Lutz! Help me, Lutz! And he's going to end up seeing this somehow because of that stupid ring, and yet can't do a gosh darn thing about it. I gotta do it. I gotta keep going. Rescue and reprimand. It all happened right after I cried for help as loud as I could with my hands in the air to try to stop the bleeding. A beam of blue light shot high into the sky, and then immediately black somethings rained down around me as I heard the sounds of flapping wings. Thank God the lights are here! The ground shook as the thing slammed into the ground. I strained to look and saw multiple black arrows piercing the ground by my feet. A trauma wrapped around me calmed as if its strength had been drained. High Priest! The familiar arrows encouraged me to look up. I could see a lion with its wings spread wide facing toward me. With his arrows I should be fine, but my relief only lasted a few seconds. The blood dripping from my hand revitalized the trauma in seconds. It resumed moving, stretching from my stomach to my chest. New sprout after new sprout appeared, wrapping me around me further and tightening the grip of my feet. Hurry, High Priest! The white lion swooped down, and the High Priest jumped from it so quickly it was hard to believe he was wearing a full set of plate armor. Yeah. In his hand was a black arrow, blessed by the god of darkness. He used it to stab and slice at the Tromba while rushing this way. "Mind, what in the world is going on?" he shouted. Long story, Shikikoza's fault. Apprentice, I'm done. Daniel, having finally gotten the God of Darkness's divine protection, began swinging his knife and fighting hard to free me. But Daniel's knife didn't hold a candle to the High Priest's black arrows. No matter how much he sliced, the Tromba didn't slow down at all. The protection isn't working. The protection is working, it's just that the Tromba is recovering immediately somehow. The Tromba would stop moving after being pierced by arrows, but within moments it would regain its power and began moving again. It was slower than before, but it wasn't rotting or falling apart at all. The High Priest clicked his tongue as he continued slicing with an arrow. High Priest, my blood. It's my blood getting on the Tromba. Your blood? No, of all things. The High Priest's voice grew harsher after I told him why the Tromba was rejuvenating. Despite his helm blocking most of his face, I could see that his eyebrows had shot up with fury. For what purpose did you think I separated you from the battle and went out of my way to assign guards to you? What purpose did those guards serve? Incompetent fools, both of them. He spat curses at the two knights who had been left behind to guard me. Daniel was fighting hard with his black knife, and Shikikoza was in the middle of trying to get the God of Darkness's blessing. Given that Shikikoza had ignored his superior's order and hurt the one he was meant to protect with the knife, resulting in the current situation, they definitely were incompetent at their jobs. Incidentally, judging by the curses the High Priest continued to spit out while fending off the Tromba with his arrow, I had excessively high amounts of mana. He murmured that even if half the entire knight's order attacked the Tromba at once, Daniel included, nothing would come from it. No amount of fighting will matter while your wound remains open. Mine, where were you cut? Right here. I reached my left hand out as far out as I could. The High Priest clicked his tongue at the sight of the gaping wound and murmured, I'm not even going to try. I'm not even going to try to say that. His black bow turned to a glowing wand. He then murmured, Rot, and swung the wand, leading to a red pillar of light shooting into the sky. That must have been some kind of signal, as the other knights began flying this way. This will hurt, but contain your tears. They are infused with mana just as your blood is, warned the High Priest before gently tracing his glowing wand against my wound. The moment the light radiating from his wand touched my skin, my entire body jerked. The pain and unsettling feeling of something foreign forcing its way inside of my body hit me so hard that goosebumps formed across my body. Instinctual tears welled in my eyes as I looked up and took deep breaths so they wouldn't fall. My wound heated up. I could feel the mana inside of me all racing toward my wound to block the entry of the foreign substance. My mana hit the mana the High Priest was pouring into me, and my wound shone with a faint yellow light. When it faded, my wound had completely closed up. The cut, that was a temporary measure that did nothing more than seal the wound. The mana had sealed it, but not cured it. Using mana right on top of a Tromba is tantamount to suicide, but we had no choice. Spoke the High Priest, sounding exhausted. My wound had sealed, but the Tromba was even more energized than before. High Priest, I had to sever my divine protection to heal your wound. I no longer have a weapon capable of combating the Tromba. Help should be arriving soon, but... The High Priest trailed off and glared at the sky, then shouted, Hurry! At the descending knights. He was normally so calm and rarely showed any emotion outside of the hidden room, so hearing him shout angrily made me jerk within my branch prison. Lord Ferdinand, why did you signal for a... What in the world? The knights descended one by one, each widening their eyes in shock upon seeing me imprisoned within a second Tromba. Karstedt, the guards you selected are incompetent and brought about this mess. Save mine immediately. I had to sever my protection and thus will be of no use. The branches are approaching her neck. Hurry. Sir. The High Priest, lacking any weapons to fight the Tromba with, stepped back and let another armored knight charge forward, swinging his black halberd down. It slammed into the ground with a crash, sending a dirt cloud and Tromba chunks flying. I gagged and coughed on the cloud. Karstedt, do not put a scratch on mine. That will only feed it further. After instructing Karstedt to swing his blade such that he cut away the branches without harming me, the High Priest walked towards Shikikoza and the attendants. I could see the wrath radiating off of him as clear as day, and honestly, it was terrifying. The worst, given our difference in status, it was possible that he would take all of Shikikoza's complaints to heart and unleash all his fury onto me. It was even a possibility that I would be charged with some crime or another, since it was my blood that had given the Tromba life. I just couldn't deny the possibility. As I began to wallow in despair over what the future held for me, a large number of knights crowded around me. They thrust their halberds into the mess of branches and chopped the Tromba's roots apart without pausing for a moment. Meanwhile, Daniel used his black knife to cut the stalks that had started to wrap around my neck bit by bit. The divine protection's doing its work, said Daniel with relief. Since the cut on the back of my hand had been sealed, there was no dripping blood to revitalize the Tromba. It stopped growing. Just as they had with the giant Tromba, weapons with the God of Darkness's blessing turned the branches black wherever they touched. I let out a sigh of relief once I was free from the fear of being choked by the branches. This is hard. You're the only one here with a knife. Be careful, Daniel. It seemed they couldn't change the shape of their weapons after they received the blessing. The knights had to use their large weapons meant for cutting down the giant Tromba carefully. slicing away the branches bit by bit. Daniel, and you, mine, I believe. How did this happen? I have never seen Lord Ferdinand that angry before. Karstedt lowered his voice and asked that as soon as he could while chopping away the branches at my feet with his halberd. Well, Daniel looked in Shigikoza's direction, his armor clanking. But he trailed off, lacking the will to speak up. His weak attitude was both frustrating and a grim reminder of how harsh this status-based society really was. Now that the branches around my throat had been cut down to my chest, it would be pretty simple for me to just state the truth, but I didn't know if Karstedt would believe me, and I can imagine that it would all come down to status. I had no idea if anyone would listen to or trust a commoner apprentice shrine maiden like me. Karstedt was a noble too, after all. What should I do? I want as much information as possible. Say what you know. Karstedt urged Daniel and me on with clear, teeth-gritting frustration in his voice, which reminded me that the High Priest had yelled in anger at Karstedt as well, saying that he had selected incompetent fools as guards. Given that Karstedt wanted to know why the High Priest was so mad, he might listen to what I had to say just to protect himself. Lord Karstedt, will you guarantee my safety if I speak what I know? I asked Karstedt, in part trying to confirm if Shigikoza's behavior was normal for a noble. Now was a rare, safe opportunity for me to speak, since they probably wouldn't kill me before I had performed the ritual. If I tell the truth, will you be so angered that you pull me by the hair and attempt to gouge out my eyes with a knife if you don't like what I say? What in the world? Daniel, did you do that to an apprentice shrine maiden? Karstedt removed his helmet with a loud clank. His face was filled with blatant fury, and his narrowed eyes cut right through Daniel, who began sputtering in surprise to try and defend himself. It wasn't me! Shigikoza turned out the knife to threaten the apprentice. I tried to help her, but he told me to know my plate. You fool! Of course Lord Ferdinand is furious. Karstedt ripped part of the black bristle tromba off me using sheer force. The branches creaked as they burst apart in his hands. It seemed that Karstedt was just as mad at the guards as the High Priest was. I concluded that I could probably tell the truth without worrying about him slicing away at me in rage. Karstedt directed his rage-filled, light blue eyes toward me. Mine, tell me everything. Swear an oath to the gods and speak with honesty. Understood, Lord Karstedt. I swear to the gods I will not lie to you. Hold on, said Daniel as he raised a hand, but Karstedt swatted it away. He intended to hear me out, and I was willing to tell. And as I did, telling him everything the two guards had done in detail, while emphasizing that the attendants could serve as reliable witnesses to back me up. The tromba was so tightly woven around me in so many layers that it would take some time to untangle me safely. So much time that it wasn't even done by the time I finished telling Karstedt everything. Are you all right? No. Please call my attendant. To be frank, I was a complete mess. My new ceremonial robes were ripped everywhere, and there was holes wherever blood had fallen, so as if the tromba had eaten the bloody cloth itself. My body hurt everywhere, and due to fighting back so hard against the tromba, I felt so exhausted I could barely move. Where is the apprentice shrine maiden's attendant? Karstedt had to meet up my exhausted body. It seemed my droopy self would just get in the way of them chopping the roots up. His metal armor dug into me all over and it hurt, but I didn't have the strength to complain. Sister mine, I looked over to Fran as he came running this way. Karstedt handed me to him and I let myself collapse into Fran's arms. High Priest, she has a fever. I would expect as much. Let her rest nearby and give her medicine. She has lost blood and was tangled in a tromba of that size. No doubt she has lost much of her mana. The High Priest, having finished interrogating Shigikoza, took only one glance at me before looking away. Now that his helmet was off and I could see his expression clearly, he seemed even more furious than before. Understood. Fran set me down in a warm spot where the sun hit, then took a bottle with a light green liquid inside of his bag. Please drink this, Sister Mine. It's a High Priest potion. Drinking something I didn't recognize was intimidating, but he could probably force me to drink it whether I wanted to or not. Having no other choice, I went to take the bottle. But I kept my arms raised to stop the flow of blood so long that they were like lead. I couldn't lift either of them. I'm sorry, Fran. It seems I can't lift my arms. Fran supported my limp back and brought the open bottle to my mouth for me. The smell of the potion shot into my nose so strong and similar to Chinese herbal recipes that it made me gag. Fran, is this really okay to drink? The High Priest drank some himself earlier. It is a rejuvenating potion for exhaustion and mana that he personally prepared. I could hardly refuse a potion that beneficial, and if the High Priest himself had drunk some, I couldn't trust that it wasn't poison. I let it pour down my throat while grimacing at the strong smell. Ugh. I hurriedly shut my mouth before I could throw it all up. Tears surged out of my eyes and my entire body shook. My tongue went numb, my throat burned like it was on fire. The horrible flavor was so intense and overwhelming, it honestly made me think that I wouldn't be able to taste any food for days after this. It was hard to imagine that this potion was fit for human consumption. Fran paled at the sight of me twitching with my mouth shut and ran over to the High Priest. High Priest, Sister Mine appears to be in great pain. I had sacrificed the taste so that it would take effect immediately, replied the High Priest without even glancing in my direction. He wasn't wrong either, so I could already feel the weight lifting from my body and the fever cooling down. Wow, I think my fever's gone. The potion was so effective I couldn't believe it, but it tasted so horrible that not even truisms about bad-tasting medicine being good for you can make me feel better about it. I can honestly see myself begging for him to improve the flavor. He probably wouldn't listen since he had sacrificed it intentionally to improve his effects, but at the very least he could try and make it taste like kale juice. The knights finished eradicating the tromba while it was resting. Unlike the giant one, this tromba hadn't made a crater. One of the knights said it was because it had blown from my mana. Naturally occurring tromba buried deep in the ground and sucked up mana from the ground for months, or at worst for years before sprouting. The roots ended up so deep that exterminating them was a Herculean task. Everyone form up. The knights lined up in formation at Karstat's orders. The only ones who didn't were me and the guards who had been assigned to me. They had both taken off their helmets and were kneeling before the high priest next to each other, eyes locked to the ground. Mine, come here. I was there with everyone else since I could move again. After being called by the high priest, I walked up and stood a half step behind him. I was so short that I made eye contact with the two guards once they lifted their heads a bit. As I had expected from their voices, they both looked younger than 20, likely having just reached adulthood. Shikikoza had yellow-green hair that screamed personality and deep green eyes filled with hate. He had a nice face, but he wore his arrogance on his sleeve and spoiled it all. His eyes made it clear that he considered me responsible for everything. Daniel had plain brown hair, his gray eyes were filled with worry, and he wore a deeply apologetic expression. I hadn't noticed when he had the helmet on, but, well, he felt like the kind of guy that was just asking to be bullied. Now then, Shikikoza, Daniel, if you have anything to say in your defense, now is the time, said the high priest. Shikikoza lifted his head. There is no need for me to defend myself. That girl is a commoner, and that alone is enough. He spoke with such utter confidence that it was impossible not to realize he fully expected that defense to be enough. I pressed a hand under my chest, overcome by the sheer horror that lurked beneath his words. He didn't need to defend himself because I was a commoner. In this world, nobles trampling on commoners with impunity wasn't just commonplace, it was accepted as the proper way of things. You say that despite the fact that I told you not to let any harm come to her. The commoner hurt herself by standing up without warning. I am not to blame for that. Well, you were the one holding the knife. If you hadn't been holding a knife like that, then that wouldn't have happened. Shikikoza shook his head, even after the high priest spoke with dripping rage. I see, murmured the high priest. He then looked at Daniel, who twitched in fear at the high priest's gaze before looking down and beginning to speak. I was told to know my place and did not have the courage to defy him further. Forgive me. The high priest looked at Daniel, whose eyes were locked on the ground, and sighed. Yes, as your defense suggests, it seems we must each remember our place. At the high priest's words, Shikikoza looked up with glee written on his face. He shot me a triumphant grin, and I couldn't help but grit my teeth in frustration while fiddling with the hole in my robes. The high priest took a step forward. Who here has the highest status, Shikikoza? You, Lord Ferdinand. Shikikoza replied immediately, which told how obvious his answer was. But he didn't get the intent of the question and thus tilted his head a bit in confusion. That's correct. And I gave you a clear order. Protect the Apprentice Shrine Maiden. Let no harm come to her. If you knew your place, you would know what to prioritize and what job to fulfill. You are the one who needs to remember their place. Ho ho ho! Shikikoza looked up at the high priest in shock. His expression was baffled, and his eyes were open wide in disbelief. But she is a commoner, a foolish child that is disturbing the temple's order. It seems you do not understand the situation, so I will explain. Mine is an apprentice shrine maiden who has been given blue robes. We of the temple sought her entry due to her great amount of mana, and gave her blue robes with the Archduke's express permission. Know well that by insulting her, you are insulting the temple and the Archduke himself, declared the high priest, and I heard everyone gasp. Shikikoza, Daniel, and even some of the knights lined up behind me. As you know, our country does not have enough nobles. That means we do not have enough mana wielders to operate the systems of government. You should know that well, as one who returned from noble society to noble society from the temple. It seemed that the high priest and Shikikoza knew each other because Shikikoza had been raised in the temple as an apprentice blue priest. That would explain why he felt so much resistance towards a commoner like me wearing blue robes. All the blue robe priests in the temple had blown up in protest over being treated on the same level as a commoner. The fact is that everyone in the temple, only mine and I have enough mana to perform the ritual. As Apprentice Shrine Maiden would never be here if we had a blue priest who could perform the ritual. I can express nothing but exasperation at everyone too foolish to realize that. Mine is here as an apprentice blue shrine maiden. She is here to perform the ritual. You did not harm any mere commoner. You harmed an apprentice blue shrine maiden who has been given blue robes. The high priest repeatedly emphasized that I was an apprentice blue shrine maiden. Taken another way, that was a sign that he would not be able to punish Shikikoza if I were indeed any mere commoner. I squeezed the blue ropes that I wore to protect myself, and although it was far too late for me to be doing so, thanked Benno for wisely advising me to negotiate for blue robes. You ignored orders, abandoned your duty, harmed who you were supposed to protect, allowed a second unnecessary trauma to appear, disturbed the Knight's order, and gave everyone more work. Furthermore, the Order's honor has been tainted now that one of its knights has harmed the one they were assigned to protect. Do not think you will get off lightly. The Archduke will inform you of your punishment before long. The High Priest looked away from the two of them and turned to face the lined-up knights. He then coldly looked down at Karstedt, who was kneeling in front of them all. Karstedt, as the captain of the Knight's Order, you are responsible for selecting these incompetent guards and training new recruits so poorly that they do not even listen to orders. I will inform you of your punishment at a future date. The failings of the Order are failings of my own. I deeply apologize for the trouble I have given you, Lord Ferdinand. Karstedt seemed to have been prepared to accept punishment the moment he learned that the High Priest's anger was justified. He bowed his head before the High Priest calmly without as much of a flinch, and so did all the kneeling knights behind him. Do I really want to continue now, or do I want to do another video? Continue now! The healing ritual. Mine, we will finish the ritual while the potion is in effect. Once he had finished reprimanding Shikikoza, the High Priest flourished his cape, touched his right gauntlet, and turned the stone into his white lion thing. The knights all stood up in turn and began bringing out their own creatures to ride. Come here. The High Priest held out his hand. I walked up to him as gracefully as I could, then extended my own hand. He lifted me up, and this time, I grabbed the lion's rein so that I wouldn't lose my balance. After nimbly jumping on behind me, the High Priest raised a hand, depart. He gripped the reins, and the once statuesque lion began moving as if it had been given life. It extended its wings far and flapped itself into the air, heading towards the ruins of where the giant Tromba had just been rampaging. The Tromba from a second ago had sucked the mana it needed out of my blood instead of the surrounding earth, so that was fine. But the giant Tromba had left a huge crater where it had been, and if I didn't perform the healing ritual to fill the ground back with mana, not even grass would grow on that crater. I feel that I have wronged you. The High Priest spoke to me in a quiet voice from behind, perhaps because now that we were in the air, he didn't have to worry about other people hearing him. I did not intend for you to be hurt, and I did not intend to expose you to such malice, and finally, I did not intend to put you in such a state that a potion was necessary just to give you enough temporary strength to perform the ritual. It was my foolish mistake for not even expecting the Knight's order to go against my orders. Oh, you didn't expect it to happen because you figured they were all properly trained. That's Karstedt's blunder, not yours. His tone was dripping with frustration and remorse. The guards meant to ensure everything proceeded smoothly had in fact done the opposite, and he was regretting assigning them to me at all. But he wasn't responsible for Shikikoza going berserk, the malicious rumors about me being spread about even my poor devouring health. It's not your fault, High Priest. It is. All matters related to you are my responsibility, he said, his voice firm. Given that the temple could not function without me, commoner or not, he considered it part of his job as High Priest to facilitate my assimilation into the temple. He was indeed the kind of perfectionist that couldn't trust work to other people and ended up making life harder for himself by trying to do it all on his own. Is the potion working, mine? Yes. Good. Then I know very well that the ritual will place a great burden on you, but it is vital that we show the Knight's Order that you are capable of performing your duties as an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden. I will protect you. Show them you are fit to wear the blue robes, that you are essential to both the temple and the Knight's Order, the protector of the land. Shove it in their faces. If the Knight's Order recognizes your importance, you will have more tools to protect yourself. The High Priest had protected me by stating I wasn't a normal commoner. I was an apprentice Blue Shrine Maiden. I needed to do my job well enough that they accepted that I was worthy of the position. I'm nervous about it, though. This is the first time I'm performing the ritual. I don't know if I can do it right. I knew I had to do it, but I was terrified that I couldn't. It was my first time performing a ritual. And yet the High Priest blew away my worries with a short laugh. Humph. You don't have anything to worry about. I will prepare the stage, such as that the Knight's Order will have no choice but to accept you. What? I only start fights that I know I can win. His chilly voice sent shudders down my spine. It seemed that his anger at his plan being thrown out of his order has not faded at all. Daniel was really kind to me, and he did try to save me. He even yelled at Shikikoza for my sake, but please don't take it all on him. The giant Tromba had left a large disk of exposed earth in its wake, which made it look like someone had put a massive brown plate on top of the forest. It felt like there was enough space to found a farming town here once plants were growing again. A farming town here would make it quite difficult for the priests and nobles heading out for the spring prayer and the harvest festival. The earth will lose its strength once again without the spring prayer, added the High Priest. It certainly wouldn't be difficult for the priests and nobles to go all the way deep into the forest to perform the ritual, not to mention the townsfolk who might want to go to town. The almost lion descended to the center of the crater, and the High Priest escorted me to the ground. The Knights' Order landed one by one, their animals returning to their gauntlets as they hit the ground. Once all the knights were lined up, they took off their helmets and knelt. It seemed that watching the ritual with helmets on was disrespectful to the gods. The high priest took off his helmet as well, setting it down by his feet. The ground beneath us... The ground beneath us wasn't the kind of black earth we saw back in the forest. It was reddish-brown and dry dirt like you might find in a school sports grounds. High Priest, the staff. Arno had on a staff a bit longer than a full-grown man, which the High Priest took. It was a divine instrument, the symbol of the goddess of water flew train, and it was necessary for this ritual. The staff was made of gold, and the tip held a large magic stone, clear green and about the size of an adult's palm, gleaming in the sunlight. The handle was dotted with magic stones lined up next to each other, and most were colored. At a glance, I could see that it was charged up with plenty of mana. Shigikoza, the high priest, called out to the knights. Shigikoza rushed to sway, his armor clanking as he speed-walked. The high priest faced him and held out the divine staff. You will perform the ritual. Shigikoza blinked in confusion. The high priest looked down at him coldly, then gave an exaggerated sigh. You abandoned your duties, did you not? You must have plenty of mana in reserve. My initial plan was to begin the ritual myself to show how it is done, but due to your tomfoolery giving me extra work, I do not have mana to spare. That's a lie. You definitely have tons of mana to spare. The unfathomable, foul-tasting potion he had concocted was as effective as one would expect from how hard he sacrificed the flavor. There was no way he didn't have any spare mana after drinking it. He didn't say when he drank it, though. He just said he drank it. He could have drunk it before the dang ritual. Why would he drink it before the ritual? Because he should have had mana already by then, so I guess he's lying. Yeah, he's lying. Surely you are capable of this. Show mine the power of a real noble. The high priest basically forced the divine staff into Shigikoza's hands. He was clearly thrown off by this unexpected development, but the moment he noticed me looking at him, he glared at me and straightened his back. O goddess of water flew train, bringer of healing and change. O 12 goddesses who serve by her side. Shigikoza began chanting the prayer in a loud, clear voice. The large stone on the staff began to shine, and the ground around Shigikoza began to darken with the bottom of the staff at the center. Not long after the ground darkened, fresh green buds started to pop out. I couldn't help but let out an excited wow. I never thought that just gripping the divine instrument and chanting a memorized prayer would bring about such palpable change to the earth. It was like a science experiment I had seen in an educational video back in my Arana days. The earth changed color as it was filled with mana, plants blooming bit by bit, but the growing circle stopped once it hit a radius of about 10 meters. Keep going, the crater is far from filled. The high priest slammed Shigikoza once he tried to stop, refusing to allow him to let go of the staff, which continued to drain his mana as long as he was holding it. Shigikoza's head was getting heavy from all the mana that had been drained out of him, and soon he collapsed right onto his knees. Despite all your arrogance, this is the best you could do? I see that the Knight's Order truly had to scrape the bottom of the barrel to fill out their ranks. Ha ha! Blow to your pride! Without even looking at Shigikoza, the high priest grabbed the wavering staff before it fell. He then beckoned me over while holding it up. You were the only one left, mine. It is time to do your job. I planted my feet far apart to steady myself and grabbed a hold of the staff, which was so large it would fall over if I relaxed my grip for a moment. Shigikoza had given a live demonstration of what to do, which eased my fears about messing up. The high priest was basically telling me to show off, so I guess I should pour in as much mana as I can. I tightened my grip on the staff and lowered my eyes, breathing deeply. I took off the top of the box I usually kept tightly shut to contain my mana, allowing it to go free inside my body. I could feel the overwhelming mana surge toward the staff in search of an exit. O goddess of water flew train, bringer of healing and change. O 12 goddesses who serve by her side, please hear my prayer and lend me your divine strength. Grant me the power to heal your sister, the goddess of earth. I cannot talk. Gidol, who has been wounded by those who serve evil. The green magic stone embedded in the staff shone brightly. My mana whirlpooled around me, kicking up a swirl of wind with me at its center. The wind lifted up my hair while my robes fluttered. I shall offer this divine note to thee, casting ripples of the highest order. May your holy power be granted. May you fill the world with your divine color to mine your own heart's will. My mana burst into the staff, seeping into the earth through the staff's magic stone. The circle of dark earth shot outward, with fresh greenery sprouting and blooming before my eyes. You may stop. That is more than enough. At the high priest's prompting, I stopped the flow of mana and locked it back in the box. The staff immediately stopped shining. Before I knew it, the entire crater had been covered in grass that reached up to my ankles. Is that all I need to do, high priest? Yes, the earth is now filled with mana. In fact, you went too far. That last bit was a quiet murmur, so quiet I almost didn't hear it. I tilted my head in confusion, but the high priest just shook his head as turned to face the Night Order. I turned around as well and saw that all of the knights were stunned, their faces painted with utter disbelief. All of them had wide eyes, and many of their jaws had actually dropped. What? Why are they all looking at me like that? I went a little hard since the high priest told me to show off, but maybe I did go too far. Their gawking looks made me feel so uncomfortable that I slid behind the high priest, fidgeting. But he stepped in front of me and cleared his throat. This is the Apprentice Shrine Maiden, accepted by both the temple and the Archduke. Are there any here who may object to that decision? The knights came back to their senses and all lowered their eyes, keeping their silence. They all stayed in formation with their eyes on the ground. That was probably how they conveyed their lack of objections. As I blinked in surprise, the high priest nodded. No objections then? Good. Only when the high priest gave a dismissive did the knights look up. But their expressions of surprise were now gone, replaced with the sharp eyes of predators who had found their prey. Eek. They looked so scary that I had to swallow an actual scream. I froze up beneath the weight of so many hungry stares. It felt like they had concluded I was prey to hunt and devour. The moment I let my guard down, they would bite. I was the mouse being chased by hungry snakes. With trembling legs, I took a stealthy step to the side to hide completely behind the high priest's back. I forgot to mention, the high priest continued. But the apprentice is in my custody. I believe you understand the significance of that. His words calmed their carnivorous stares at once. That was a relief, but out of all of them, I was the only one who didn't actually understand the significance of that. Yeah, those stares, that was like, oh, we found someone who we could possibly set up, political marriages for with the whole Mana situation. Good, now let us return. Everyone immediately began to prepare to leave while I alone stood blinking in confusion. Arnold took the divine instrument from the high priest while Fran made sure I was okay. The knights put their helmets back on, called forth their animals, and prepared to ride. Come here, mine. The high priest standing next to the collapsed Shikikoza with Karstad beckoned me over. I held back the urge to run, instead walking to them gracefully. Mine, do you demand any form of apology for what occurred? The high priest lowered his eyes to look at Shikikoza. He was asking that since I was the victim, but his expression made it clear that he wanted me to answer that no. I did not have any demands, but, well, I sure did. I do. The moment I said that, the high priest's brows furrowed hard and he glared at me. Again, I could hear his silent message loud and clear, but I chose to ignore it. I request new ceremonial robes. My request must have come out of left field for both of them as they looked down at me with surprise written on their faces. I spread out my arms so they could see my robes more clearly. There were gaping holes that let you see right through my sleeves so they stood as they shook in the breeze. Please order a replacement robe exactly like this one. It was new and made just for this occasion, so it was very expensive. A commoner such as myself does not have the money to prepare multiple pairs of ceremonial robes in a row. I see, they certainly are quite damaged. Karstad immediately understood me with a wry smile, but the high priest looked suspicious, as if something about my words had thrown him off. Why did you clarify that they should be exactly like your existing ones? These robes were custom made with specific instructions. I asked them to make it such that I could continue to wear them as I grew older. But they ended up destroyed before I could even perform my first ritual. It's a true shame. I exaggerated the weight of my plight, and Karstad cackled. I see that even young women have a love for clothes, he said it mirthfully. Very well, I will order new robes for you. Karstad promised to order me new robes as punishment for his Shikikoza's and Daniel's wrongdoing. That was all I wanted. I am extremely grateful. I recommend that you order the new robes from the Gilberta Company. As I cannot participate in rituals without the ceremonial robes, I request that you have them work at an expedited speed to finish before winter. Winter? Why then? Karstad raised an eyebrow, and the high priest rubbed his temples. The rituals to offer up mana are carried out in the winter. The blue priest and the high bishop will certainly be snide if she does not have ceremonial robes for the rituals, saying the commoners cannot even prepare robes for themselves, among other things. Regardless of the fact that she lacks robes, though, through no fault of her own, explained the high priest, and I nodded solemnly. I wanted to rock the boat as little as possible. The knight's order might not mind my robes being full of holes the next time a trauma pops up, but I needed proper robes for the winter rituals. Understood. I will take care of your robes for you. Anything else? New ceremonial robes are all I need. Anything beyond that can be done in accordance with the rules of the knight's order. I would not like to earn more ire than I already have. A wise decision indeed. I will handle the rest internally then, said Karstad with a satisfied nod. I knelt and bowed my head in thanks. Geez, why are all these big holes? The robes are just finished. Fran, what in the world happened to Sister Mine? When I returned to the temple, Delia let out a shriek at my raggedy robes, and Rosina staggered back with a hand over her mouth. Many things happened, but due to the situation's involvement with the Knight's Order, I am not allowed to speak of it. Fran dodged their queries without revealing anything. I changed in a hurry so Lutz wouldn't see my messed up robe, but it seemed he knew I had been in danger. He came to the temple not long after I got back, and the second he saw me, he rushed up to me and said, Mine, I'm glad you're okay. He immediately checked the back of my hand and made sure I didn't have a fever or any other wounds. Somehow he knew all of what had happened to me. Let's, why do you know so much? Out of nowhere, I suddenly heard you crying for help. You said, "Let's help me," and like a vision of what was happening to you popped up in my head. I wanted to go help, but I had no idea where you were. I sure freaked the heck out. On top of that, apparently the mental video he saw of me being wrapped up by the tromba ended with the high priest turning his black arrow into a shining wand and healing my hand wound. He had spent the last few hours worried out of his mind, having no idea whether I had been rescued or not. Sorry for scaring you, Lutz. Hey, you're the one who was in a scary spot, not me. But anyway, what even was with that? I immediately concluded that the blue light I saw at the time was responsible for what Lutz experienced. I looked at my hand, though I had already given the ring back to the high priest, and stared at it while thoughts of everything that had happened today started through my head. I'm just glad you're safe, mine. Lutz hugged me tight, putting his mouth right next to my ear as he spoke. His worry for me was sincere, unfettered by thoughts of status, rules, or mana. His warmth finally made me break down and drop the tough fact. I knew he would be there for me, just like I would be there for him, and sometimes you just need support like that. Noble Society was really scary, I murmured, clinging tightly to Lutz. Naturally, I ended up bedridden after helping the Knight's Order. Girl, you were wrapped up in a freaking tromba. Of course you would have a freaking fever. I was in bed for days, but that was normal for this season, so my family didn't say anything about it. I just wish the high priest wasn't so obsessed with calling it his responsibility, even though it really wasn't. It was very late autumn by the time I could move again, and was finally getting cold enough that using the river to make paper was impossible. We'll have to drop by the Gilberta Company on our way back, I said, as we arrived at the temple. Fran was waiting at the gate. Sister mine, the high priest has summoned you to discuss an urgent matter. He has said to come to his room as soon as you arrive, regardless of your Hearthspell practice. After changing into my blue robes in my room, I headed to the high priest's room. Today, of all days, I would have liked to practice the Hearthspell. Despite walking with heavy feet, I inevitably reached my destination. There you are, mine. I suppose Fran conveyed my message. Follow me. The high priest walked to the hidden room, his expression a bit harder than usual. He would definitely be lecturing me. I pressed a hand against my stomach while entering the hidden room through the door he opened. Give me all the documents, said the high priest with an outstretched hand once I started pushing the documents to the side of the bench like always. I gathered them all up and handed them to the high priest. He set them onto his desk and brought... Why don't you just leave them on the desk? Good God! And brought over his chair just like always, but I could see a decorative gold loop with a red gemstone embedded in it, plus a bottle small enough to be hidden in the palm of a hand. Drink this, mine. Oh, here we go, guys. The high priest opened his hand and held out the bottle to me. The glass was a bit thick, but not so opaque that I couldn't see the red liquid sloshing inside of it. What is it? A potion I concocted myself. It will improve the flow of mana within you, which will be important for this magic tool. Swallow it no matter how repulsive the taste might be. He thrust the bottle right into my face, his tone making it clear that he wouldn't take no for an answer. That really made me not want to drink the potion. I hadn't forgotten how wretched his last potion had tasted. His eyes narrowed as I faltered, and his lips curved into a slight grin. Would you prefer me to hold your nose and force it down your throat? He would. He probably would do that. He was serious. The high priest was the kind of person who would do that in a blink of an eye as if he felt it was necessary. I shook my head hard and took the bottle from him, timidly bringing it to my mouth while fearing what flavor it might have this time. It didn't smell that odd, at least, but taking it slow would just make me suffer the taste longer. I pumped myself up and gulped it all down at once. It didn't taste bad at all. Truth be told, it was actually a little sweet and tasty. High priest, it tasted fine to me. It was sweet and tasty. I would really like it if he'd make that rejuvenation potion taste this good. I handed him the empty bottle while thinking about how murderously bad the last one had been. But he just opened his eyes wide in surprise. It tasted sweet to you? Yes. Should it not have? Well, that is not important right now. Put this on and ensure the gem makes contact with your forehead. The high priest held the gold loop with a red gemstone. Knowing that there was no point in arguing, I took it and put it on with the gemstone touching my forehead. Just like with the magic ring, it shrunk in size and fit against my head perfectly like a circlet. High priest, you said this was a magic tool, right? Yes, I asked the Archduke whether I could borrow it, and at last it arrived. Was it... what? I was suddenly hit with a heavy sense of drowsiness. My head spun and my eyelids started to droop all on their own. What? Why am I so sleepy? Lie on your side and allow yourself to sleep. There is no need for you to resist. I could only faintly hear the high priest. I was hearing his words just fine, but my mind was so foggy, it was taking too much time to understand what he was saying. Since he said I didn't need to resist, I decided to just entrust my body to the sleepiness and assume my normal sleeping position. I took out my hair stick, took off my shoes, and lay on the bench. Once I was on my side, I immediately felt my consciousness fade into the dark abyss. Good night. I used the last of my strength to squeeze out a good night. I could feel the high priest brushing aside my bangs. He must have been close to me, as his voice echoed like his mouth was right next to my ear. This is a magic tool that searches through the memories of witnesses and suspected criminals to ensure that they are telling no falsehoods. It is reserved for grave crimes, which requires the Archduke himself to intervene, and I will use it to see for myself this world of dreams that you speak. Uh-oh, here we go! Ah, the epilogue! Okay, I'm gonna make the epilogue and everything else one less video, and then we'll be getting into Volume 3, Part 2. I'll see y'all next time.